And now we move to the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who said that he will join an emergency meeting of the Arab League in Cairo next week to discuss the reconstruction of Gaza as Arab states weigh a post-war plan for the Palestinian enclave to counter U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal. More details in the next report.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he will join an emergency meeting of the Arab League in Cairo next week to discuss the reconstruction of Gaza as Arab states weigh a post-war plan for the Palestinian enclave to counter U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal. Guterres said Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, must be treated as one and governed by a Palestinian government. He said Gaza needed to remain an independent, democratic and sovereign Palestinian state with no reductions in its territory or forced transfer of its populations. Guterres said he would outline priorities at the March 4th Arab League meeting, including that the ceasefire and hostage deal between Israel and Hamas must hold, and there must be a clear political framework towards Gaza's recovery, reconstruction and lasting stability. He also said he'll seek an urgent de-escalation of the situation in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, where Israeli-Palestinian violence has spiked. He told reporters that the UN, that Tuesday's summit is an opportunity for leaders across the Arab world to come together and discuss the elements required to deliver peace and stability in Gaza. There's no sign of agreement over Gaza's future, either amongst or between Israelis and Palestinians, or between Western and Arab governments. Israeli military aggression has killed more than 48,000 people, according to the Palestinian authorities, whilst destroying large swaths of the tiny crowded territory and leaving most of its 2 million inhabitants homeless.
Dear viewers, you're still watching Arab Affairs Show on Night TV International, and for more deep analysis on what's going on in Palestine, the occupied Palestine, also in the Arab region, I'm delighted to interview Mr. Ramzy Khoury, the journalist from Jordan. Mr. Ramzy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Reem.
Good afternoon. First of all, as of course you have been following the news as Israel wants to extend the first phase and not start the second phase of the ceasefire agreement. How do you comment on this, and why does Israel have this will or desire?
Netanyahu has a very big problem with his coalition. Now, if he goes into negotiations and he starts a second phase, as per the initial agreement, then his coalition may break. And if his coalition breaks, it means that he will be forced to go to elections, even if the opposition are willing to give him time. But it's a matter of time. So maybe 3 months they give him, or 4 months. At the end of the day, he will go to elections. And if he does go to elections, he will lose the elections. So what Netanyahu needs to do is to buy time. He wants to try to keep the coalition intact as long as possible, and at the same time try to achieve some kind of victory. Because until today, the Israeli people who will vote in the next elections do not see any victory that has been achieved by Netanyahu and his government. And he needs that kind of victory in order to run elections and have a chance for peace. But all of this is even very complicated for two reasons. The external reason, Reem, is that Trump is in a hurry to finish with this. What Trump wants is to see all of the prisoners of war in Gaza returned and free. And he wants this to happen immediately. So this is a very big problem for Netanyahu, because if it wasn't for that kind of Trump pressure from the U.S. on him, he wouldn't have even started the first phase or agreed to the agreement of the 3 phases. Now, the other pressure that is happening is that the vast majority of the Israeli people want to see the ceasefire continue. They want to see Israel get into the second phase in order to release their sons who are actually held by the Palestinian resistance. Now, why is this very, very complicated, Reem? It's because if the what Netanyahu wants is to continue with the first phase and get prisoners out during the first phase. Now the Palestinians cannot do that because the only thing that the Palestinians have in terms of power are these prisoners that they are holding, and if they let them free before they reach a permanent ceasefire and the full withdrawal of Israeli troops out of Gaza, then they have no power anymore, and the Israelis can actually continue the war, blast Gaza, continue the genocide, do whatever they want. So the Palestinians don't really have a choice but to say no. And that's exactly what the Palestinians did. The Palestinians said no. Netanyahu sent a group to Egypt, and what the group had to put on the table, the offer that they put on the table was ridiculous. If Hamas releases more prisoners, we will continue the first phase. And that's a ridiculous offer. And what Netanyahu may do now is to say that unfortunately Hamas is reneging and Hamas is not accepting our offers, despite the fact that Israel has reneged on the agreement on many, many counts, over 100 counts already. And one of them is that 2 weeks ago they should have started negotiations on the second phase. They did not start negotiations until today.
Yes, and regarding the negotiations, the next phase of negotiations and also the second phase of the agreement, in your opinion, what should be done or provided from the Arab nations so that the negotiations could be, let me say, less complicated at least?
Well, the negotiations haven't even started.
Yes.
And the roadmap that governs the negotiations has already been negotiated on. So everybody knows what the first phase was supposed to achieve. Everybody knows what the second phase is supposed to achieve. And really, the negotiations are in order to see how to achieve them, not exactly what to achieve and not to achieve. And when Israel starts talking a different language that is outside the boundaries of the agreement that was initially made,
exactly,
then Israel is reneging on the agreement. Honestly, in my opinion, the best pressure on Netanyahu right now is Trump. Trump needs to tell Netanyahu that he has to start the second phase negotiations immediately. And we know that Trump's envoy to this process, Mr. Witkoff, is not very happy with Netanyahu. And we know that because he was supposed to come to the Middle East in order to oversee the process, and he decided not to come when Netanyahu decided to renege and procrastinate and did not meet the agreement. And Mr. Witkoff is a businessman. At the end of the day, a businessman knows very well that if you don't meet an agreement that is made, the conditions of an agreement that is made, then you are not to be trusted in the future for further agreements. And this is not acceptable to a businessman, and Witkoff is a businessman, really.
Also, when following different analysis from experts in this regard, there are so many talks about the benefits of the American administration of the second phase of the agreement, as we can see like contradictions that there are now desire to extend the first phase, and also threats and statements that are threatening coming from the Israeli government to extend or even continue the war and the violence in Gaza Strip again, and on the other side starting the second phase. So between all these divisions that are coming out from the Israeli government and from the American administration, where do you think the stability could take place and how?
Well, the agreement that was reached under the auspices of Egypt, Qatar, and the USA is very clear. Even if the second phase doesn't start, no side is allowed to continue the war. And no side is allowed to do any military attacks. And all of the food, medical assistance will continue to flow in until the two sides start negotiations on the second phase and the start of the second phase. So if Israel was to continue any military action against Gaza, it is bluntly reneging against the agreement that was reached. And had that agreement not been reached, the Palestinian resistance wouldn't have even started phase one. The only reason why they started phase one is because of these conditions that were agreed upon by Israel and by all parties. And therefore, and guaranteed, by the way, by the U.S. and by Egypt and Qatar.
Yes.
And therefore, what we need to see is for Netanyahu to move forward. And if Netanyahu doesn't move forward, then the status quo should remain without any military action. If there is military action, then that is going to complicate everything, Reem, in a very big way, because it becomes very difficult to trust any agreement that would be reached in the future. The Americans know this and they understand it, and so does Egypt and so does Qatar. They understand that if Israel was to renege on the agreement that was reached, who is going to trust Israel on the second phase or the third phase?
Yes.
Now, I want to clarify something.
Yes.
This issue of continuing the first phase is basically reneging on the agreement. Because what does that mean? Continuing what? All of the conditions that are the Palestinians were supposed to meet during the first phase have been met, and more and more. The Palestinians actually gave Israel more prisoners than stipulated by the conditions of the agreement. And therefore, you either go to a second phase or you don't go anywhere. And if you don't go anywhere according to the agreement, the status quo continues. All of the assistance continues to flood into Gaza. Even that Israel is reneging on. When I said that Israel has reneged on 100 conditions already, part of it is the fact that Israel is not allowing enough aid to come into Gaza as per the agreed upon conditions of the agreement. But
yes,
anyway,
and also, Mr. Ramzy, before I just end this phone call, just in short notes, I cannot miss hearing your short comment regarding the press conference that was just held between Dr. Badr Abdel-Ati, the Foreign Minister of Egypt, and also the Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister of Palestine regarding the emergent Arab summit that will be held very soon. How do you comment on this, and what are the outputs that you expect? Please, in short notes, as the time is very tight.
I'm very sorry, I didn't hear the question, Reem.
I'm asking you about the outputs that you expect to come out from the upcoming emergency Arab summit that will take place very soon, as a press conference was just held before this episode of Arab Affairs. What are the outputs that you expect out of this Arab summit?
A very clear plan that will be taken to Trump, President Trump of the United States of America, put forward in front of him, telling him this is what the Arabs want regarding finishing the three phases of the agreement one way or another, regarding the day after in Gaza, who is going to rule Gaza.
And this was what was just mentioned in the press conference. They mentioned a very clear plan, as you just said in the typical wording. Thank you so much, Mr. Ramzy Khoury, the journalist from Jordan, for being here with us. And dear viewers, this brings us to the end of this episode of Arab Affairs. That was Dream Tamer, and thank you for watching.